Hello, gentle marketers. Welcome to episode 64 of the Gentle Business Revolution podcast, the show where we talk about marketing your business by disrupting the current marketing paradigm, the hypey and pushy stuff, and changing it to a gentler approach, one that's based on empathy and kindness. I'm Sarah Sinacroce, I'm your host, and you know that you're in the right place if you are a heart-centered entrepreneur or change maker who is looking for a better way to market your business. Or you might also be a marketing impact pioneer, so someone that's working for an organization who does business for good. I'm featuring today's episode under the 6th P of the Gentle Marketing Mandala, the P that stands for promotion. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download your one-page marketing plan in the shape of a mandala at sarahsinacroce.com/one page, the number 1 and then page. And if you're a regular here, you know that I'm often talking about the dance between doing and being. Well, the P of promotion falls under the doing side of things. It's where we do things to become visible and get stuff done. And I'm really thrilled to have a guest today who's specializing in a holistic approach to getting things done. Louise Miller helps busy, heart-led solopreneurs get stuff done with less stress and more ease. She gently introduces them to compassionate, sustainable productivity so they can land their brilliant ideas in reality and grow a fulfilling business and create space for what they love. Louise's experience of work-related stress and anxiety towards the end of her successful 15-year career in administration and management led her to develop a slower, more mindful approach to getting things done. She helps her clients get their great ideas out of their head, notebooks and scribbles, and into reality so they can have fun in their business again. I think from that bio, you can tell why our message is so aligned. So really think you're going to enjoy this conversation. We addressed, for example, why a new, kinder definition of productivity could help you get stuff done with less stress and more ease. Also, why it's important to take a holistic approach to getting things done and what's at risk if you don't. What you need to let go of in order to find your productivity flow. And then Louise at the end shares 4 simple steps to stop wasting time, get stuff done, and reach your goals. So if you're sometimes struggling a bit with this productivity and getting things done is a bit harder for you, then this is definitely a very gentle way to inspire you and do the things that you were set out to do. And even if you're good at getting stuff done, I'm usually really good at getting stuff done. That's kind of my modus operandi. But it can also come to the point where I'm too much into the doing, and then it gets into this doership. And so even for someone like, if you're more like me, I think you'll take a lot out of this conversation. So without further ado, let's dive in. Here's my conversation with Louise Miller. Hi, Louise. How are you today?
Hi, Sarah. I'm very well. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad to have this conversation about productivity. It's one of these things, right, where I think if you kind of go into it too much, it can get really to almost a burnout. But we'll see what you have to say about, going it at the gentle way. But listeners know that I'm always talking about this dance between the being and the doing. Entrepreneurship is like this dance between being and doing. And for me, it started out with too much doing. So probably similar to you, I'm just someone who is really good at getting things done. And that means that I get all my shit done most of the time without too much, doodling and too much losing time. Mm-hmm. It also means that other people know that I'm getting things done. And so that usually means that other people come up with ideas and then they're like, okay, Sarah, you got this, right? So it's kind of a dangerous spot to be in. Like I know in our marriage, for example, Tony has a lot of good ideas. And then he just knows that if it's important to me, I will execute. If it's not important to me, I started to say, you know what, that's your thing. You got this. I'm just going to sit back and see what gets done. Mm-hmm. So how did you find out that you're a doer?
Yeah, everything you've just said, I'm smiling and nodding along with because that all really resonates. I think I have kind of always known that I'm a doer without even really realizing it. I just thought that was what everyone did. So,
yeah.
You know, and I've always been that kind of doer who is looking for the best, most efficient way of doing things, to the point of irritation to everybody around me, I think, a lot of the time.
Right.
I will tell my husband he's doing the washing up wrong, for example. There's a more efficient way. Yeah, and that kind of just naturally being really focused and just good at getting shit done, like you say, was kind of the foundations of a 15-year career in, you know, administration, and then that leading to sort of more management positions and team leader and all that kind of stuff. And like you said, you know, being a really prolific, reliable doer does have its downsides. And I certainly found myself in a place where people would come to me with the things, expecting that it would get done. I know, and then that's where the exhaustion starts to creep in, which again, if we're not balancing out, you know, as you said, if we're not balancing it out with the being, that exhaustion can really creep up without us even noticing sometimes. And I can remember really clearly a light bulb moment that happened for me when I was in my last job. I was working as a team leader in higher education, absolutely exhausted and out of my mind. And I literally stood up to go and get a glass of water. And from the sort of 15 paces from my office to the kitchen, I just was struck with this really strong kind of light bulb, bolt of lightning, if you like, that was like, okay, Louise, why are you always rushing about? And it seemed like such an odd thought to just pop into my mind. But in that moment, I realized that I would never actually be finished. And all of the rushing around trying to get things done, all that was doing was meaning that people were then giving me more things to do. And there was never going to be a point at which someone kind of patted me on the shoulder and said, it's all right, you're done now, you can stop.
Right.
And in a way that kind of led me to, started me off on the journey that I've been on ever since, with trying to find a more balanced way of doing things. Yeah.
That sounds like we have a similar journey. And what came up for me is the word perfectionism. So I think that definitely has something to do with, productivity, and then having to learn how to let go of that perfectionism a little bit. I guess that was part of your journey maybe as well. It was definitely part of mine. And two more things. The first thing you said, you thought that everyone was just like you. And that's a huge learning for me as well, that I had to realize that I have this capability of getting so many things done in a short time, and that not everyone was like that. And that I had to, I talk a lot about empathy and gentleness, that I had to be more patient with other people, if they didn't have that same kind of ability or skill. Because I always felt like it was personal when they were not getting things done as fast as I did, and didn't realize that it was actually just not the same. They didn't have that same skill, or I don't know if we should call it a skill, but they were just not built the same way. So for me, that was a big learning of, being more empathic and more patient and less impatient with people who were not doing things the same way. Does that kind of resonate with you as well? Or?
Oh, it really does. Yeah, it really, really does. And that the use of the word impatient there as well. I have been accused of patient with people. And I think, for me, the perfectionism thing absolutely resonates. And it almost became almost a dangerous part of my identity as well. And it's interesting. Yeah. So when you meet other people that are not that way, like you say, it's a learning to understand that actually we're all very different. And one of the big kind of discoveries I've made along the way is that it's okay that other people are not built like me in that respect, because that is where we all can kind of, we all work together towards a common goal. So I work with people who are not like me. Mm-hmm. They're the ones with the ideas and the inspiration, but they haven't got what I've got. So it's when I bring that to the party that stuff really happens. Mm-hmm. So it's okay that they don't have what I have. I don't have what they have. Right. It's when we all come together that the magic happens, I find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that, because it's in a way a collaboration, because you're bringing your skills, they're bringing theirs, and together you make it happen.
Exactly.
Where in the case of my husband, or it's the case for a lot of these thinkers, startup creators, they have the idea, but then they just don't know how to go about to get it into reality. Yeah. So let's unpack this word productivity a little bit. What does it mean, and what kind of feelings does it trigger? You've had this conversation with people, I think, a lot. And what do they tell you, when they hear productivity?
I think people's eyes glaze over quite often. And it's a funny word. So I'm a productivity mentor who really doesn't like the word productivity, which is a bit of a problem. But I can't find a better word, so I'm sticking with it. And people understand what you mean when you say productivity. But the image that it kind of conjures up for me as to why I don't like it, it just makes me think of like industry and manufacturing, and usually men in grey suits pointing at graphs in boardrooms. Right. And it's got quite a masculine energy to it, I think. Mm-hmm. And it feels very much about, pushing and rushing and fighting to keep up, and just striving and struggling and driving, and all of these really, just the words that don't resonate for me and that don't feel particularly inspiring. Yeah. And I think caught up in all of that as well, that a lot of guilt can come out of it, because we've got this mindset that productivity is the be all and end all. It's the most important thing. And a lot of us are raised to believe that we're not allowed to stop and we're not allowed to rest until we've done everything. But we've never done everything. There's always more to do. So I think that's got a lot to answer for in terms of why a lot of us feel guilty if we try and relax. And then there's this whole idea of our self-worth being tied up in how much we've got done, and how productive we are has got some kind of direct correlation to our self-worth as a human being. Mm-hmm. And I don't like that either. That's not good. Would you agree with that? Is that?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think our whole society is, we're trained towards productivity. Everywhere you look, it's about how can you get more done in less time, or how can you get more done with less people? How can you get more done with more automation? It's always about squeezing in more with less, right?
Yes.
And even in the kind of self-development or gentle kind of fields, it still is about more with less, it seems. Like, to give you an example, for me, it was all about more freedom, right? And so I had this striving towards more freedom without realizing that I was constantly, like you, running and hustling towards that goal of getting more done in less time, so that I could then, enjoy the freedom. But I was so exhausted by that time that, there was just, there was no point in it. Mm-hmm. So I think that really comes from a society that just kind of trains us this way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, 100% everything you just said. And it's my kind of relationship with that word and my distaste with everything you've just described, and, having personal experience of ending up off work with work-related stress and anxiety. My body shut me down because of too much of that. It was giving me a very strong message. And because of all of that, I ended up having a bit of an existential crisis back in the day, because I could see that my gifts were around productivity, for want of a better word, my ability to get stuff done. And yet I was now feeling really strongly that productivity shouldn't be the end goal. It's not the be all and end all. Mm-hmm. And I was really struggling to figure out, okay, so where do I fit then? If that's how I'm seeing things where do I go from here? And it was only when I kind of landed on looking at productivity in a completely different way that I started to find peace with that. And I've been able to see, okay, this is where I can really shine and where I can use my gifts in service, and like I say, in service of those people who don't have what we have.
Yeah.
And things have felt so much easier as a result.
So let's go there. How did you redefine it for yourself to be at peace with this word?
Yeah. So, I mean, you've already kind of said it in terms of what most people think about when they think productivity. They think it's about cramming more into less time, generally speaking. I don't see it that way. My new definition of productivity is that it's about doing what's important as efficiently as we can so that we can create space for the things we love. And when we look at it that way, the focus is suddenly on what's important. So it's not just about doing more. It's about, okay, what is it that's actually important? And then alongside that, there's a sense of letting go of what isn't important, which again feels more spacious. But I think the key thing here around creating space for the things that we love is, like you were saying with your example of working really hard towards freedom, we can create the space for that right now. Because life isn't waiting for us to get to the end of our to-do list.
Right.
It's happening right now. So when we can focus on what's important efficiently, we're able to create space in the moment for the things that we love. And some of that stuff that we love could be related to our business, but equally it could be, about traveling, all of the things that we want in our wider vision for ourselves. And I think when we look at it that way, I was having this conversation back in the early days with a friend, and she described what I do as compassionate and sustainable productivity. And that really stuck with me, because the rushing and the pushing and the hustling is not sustainable. So we need to find a gentler way of doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I so agree with the word important, right? What's important to us. And it doesn't stop there, because freedom was important to me. But like you said, you need to build these things that are important almost before everything else. You need to make sure that you go on your daily walk, if that's important to you, before all the other business stuff. I think that it was a reframe of what's important needs to go in first, right?
Yes, absolutely. Rather than that being the reward for having got things done, and just perpetuating that way of thinking. Absolutely. Yeah.
I just recently recorded an episode about self-doubt with Olivia De Silva in episode 60. And I was reflecting upon how these two may have some similarities, productivity and self-doubt. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there is certainly a kind of crossover there, and I kind of see it in two different ways. So on the one hand, I think there's a lot of us have self-doubt about what we're actually trying to achieve. So in terms of the offers we're putting out into the world, the visibility that we feel we need to have, we can feel imposter syndrome about, who are we to be sharing this stuff. So there's the self-doubt, which can then lead to fear and resistance, which actually stops us from doing the thing. And I see that a lot. And I actually do sometimes, because those are not my areas of expertise. I can spot them when they're coming up and we can have a conversation around it. But I do sometimes find myself having conversations with people who want to work with me to help them get stuff done. And I can just tell from the very first conversation, until they clear some of that stuff, that it's going to keep coming up and it's going to keep getting in the way. So it is really important that, as well as the productivity tools and techniques, that we do address the underlying gremlins that we all have that will keep coming to the surface, and that, the doubt and the fear and the resistance. So I see it in terms of what we're actually trying to put out into the world. But in a more kind of granular productivity kind of way, I also think a lot of us actually have doubt around our ability to actually be productive, particularly the people that I work with, where it's not what comes naturally to them. And they're telling themselves stories that there's something wrong with them, that they're not an organized person, that they can't finish things, that they can't do detail. And they've got all this doubt creeping in about their ability to actually do the thing that they really want to do, because they're telling themselves these stories. And when you've got brilliant ideas, but you're doubting your ability to take action, that's going to hold you back. And actually, quite often, a lot of the time, it's about finding a way of doing things that really works for you. And that could be actually getting some support with things that you know are not in your flow and that you're not able to do on your own. Get some help with it, and do some outsourcing, find some systems that work for you. I went into about this is like 15 years ago now. Have you heard of David Allen's book, Getting Things Done?
Yes.
Yeah. I picked up that book when I was having a really low moment of just feeling completely overwhelmed and under a huge amount of pressure. And I was convinced that book was going to solve all of my problems. So I followed it to the letter. I went into my office over the weekend, set up the whole system, convinced it was going to work for me, and it didn't. And I then started to tell myself these stories and doubting my own abilities and thinking there was something wrong with me, when actually it wasn't that there was something wrong with me. It was that I was trying to apply somebody else's solution to my own circumstance rather than feeling into what I actually needed and what was going to work for me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost, if we can go from, this is just occurring to me as I think, so bear with me. It's almost, if we go from self-doubt to a place of self-awareness, that's where then we can really tune in to what feels good to us, what works for us, and we can start to change some of those stories that we're telling ourselves. Does that make sense?
Totally. And yeah, it's so much aligned with everything we talk about on gentle marketing, because it's exactly that cookie cutter approach that doesn't work for us gentle marketers. We don't want to just follow someone else's template. David Allen's book might have worked 15 years ago, but now I think it's about this awareness and figuring out, well, what are my superpowers? What are my skills? And, once you did that, you actually figured out, I'm actually good at this. I'm good at getting things done. So why would I need to follow this, 8 steps or whatever, how many steps? It's really about, awareness. And I love that kind of transition from self-doubt to self-awareness, and then getting the help you need according to your skills. That maybe you don't actually need help in productivity, but you might need help with getting releasing some of these limiting beliefs, stories that you've told yourself. So I love that. I love that transition from self-doubt to self-awareness.
And I talk about self-awareness. You use the word superpower. That is, in my mind, that is our superpower when it comes to productivity. It all starts with self-awareness. Because like you say, somebody else's solution might work for them, but it's not necessarily going to work for us. And it's exploration, it's getting curious, and it's doing all of that without shame and without judgment. That's when we can start to find what works and start to move forward. Yeah.
So I think we both agree that we can give ourselves permission to slow things down a bit and just take it, not be so non-gentle with ourselves, I guess, is what I want to say. But there's certain things that we still want to move ahead with, right? There's certain things that are important to us that we want to get done. And so what would you say there? How do you work with your clients, and what kind of steps or ideas do you have around that?
Yeah, so when people come to me and we're talking productivity, I think they immediately expect me to launch into talking about structure, scheduling, to-do lists, prioritizing, all of that good stuff. Actually, the very first thing that we need to start with is our vision. So the very first thing I ask people to do is to really tune into that vision, reconnect with it, because that is what is the anchor that is going to motivate you to get things done. That is where you're heading. That's your big why that's going to really help you take action. So if you can get really clear on that vision, from there, you're able to then create aligned goals. So goals that are aligned with where you're heading, and goals that feel exciting to you. And I always ask people when they're setting those goals to ask those 2 questions. Does this feel aligned? And that's aligned with their vision and with their values. And does this feel exciting? Because if you're not excited by your goals, it's probably not the right goal. And you're going to really struggle to move ahead with that because it's just going to feel boring to you. So it all starts from that kind of big picture. And it's only when you've got clarity around that you can then really start to build some momentum. And my advice around that is to always start really small. So you've got your vision, you've identified your goals, pick a goal, and usually it's not a good idea to try and do them all at once. So pick a starting point and then just identify, okay, what is the next teeny tiny step that I need to take that's going to move me forward with this? And to break it down really small. So you know that the saying, go big or go home.
Right.
I prefer to say go small or go nowhere. Because when we're only looking at this massive thing, and I see this all the time with my clients, it feels overwhelming and you just think, how on earth am I going to do that? Right. But when you start to think, what's the next teeny tiny step? That then you can see how you can fit that into your week. And when you just keep taking one small step after the next, you're making progress and you're moving forward. And a missing piece is, again, that I see quite a lot with this, is that people don't tend to schedule time to work on their goals. So we schedule meetings with clients, we want to go to webinars, there's all these things we put in our calendars. But a lot of the time people are not creating space and leaving space for them to work on the goals that are going to get them closer to their vision. So I really do suggest that people put some time in their calendar and protect it, because if they don't do that, other things will creep in. And before you know it, a month's gone by and you've not taken any of those tiny steps forward because you just haven't had the time. So yeah, those are my kind of 4 steps to help you keep moving forward. So it's your vision, then your goals, taking teeny tiny steps and just identifying those one at a time and then putting it in your calendar.
I love that. And it's so aligned again with gentle marketing, because I say the same thing when it comes to marketing. First, always be really aware about, why you're doing what you're doing. And that's what keeps you going with your marketing. And yes, there's doing involved in marketing as well. So you always need that reminder. What is your big goal, your big vision? And I'm looking at my daily planner that I print out every evening. And right there at the top, it says the big goal, the gentle business revolution. Then priorities today, 3 priorities. Don't go over. I'd love to hear what you think, but I think more than 3 priorities per day, then they're not priorities anymore, right?
Yeah, I agree. 3 is the magic number when it comes to that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe another thing that I thought of was accountability. Like some kind of accountability partner, a coach like you, or a community to kind of, still help you kind of put a stick in the sand and say, yes, I want to, really work on this until this and this day. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. Accountability is really, really powerful. And there's lots of different ways of getting accountability. It could be working, with a coach, with someone like me, someone like you, one-to-one. It could be being a part of a group where you're all holding yourself accountable. It could just be a WhatsApp message at the beginning and the end of every day with somebody who you've agreed to work with. What I would say around accountability, though, as powerful as it is for a large chunk of the population, there are people for whom it doesn't work. So if you are a rebellious person by nature, trying to sort out some accountability can actually be really counterproductive because you're going to want to rebel against it and be like, well, why should I? I'm not going to do that kind of thing. So you need to be a bit careful if you're a rebel. And similarly, there are lots of people out there who are questioners by nature. And again, accountability can work for a questioner, but what's more powerful for them, we've talked about this already, what's more powerful for them is to really tune into the why of the thing. Because if they're not connected in with why they're doing it, they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So it's figuring that out. And are you aware of Gretchen Rubin's work?
Yeah, I was just going to say, let's mention the title of her quiz. I don't remember the exact title. Do you?
Yeah, it's the 4 Tendencies quiz.
4 Tendencies.
So if you just Google that, it's a really worthwhile thing to take. I get all my clients to do it because it just helps me understand how best to support them, and it helps them understand how to get themselves to actually get things done. So yeah,
it's true.
Really
that's very related actually to productivity. I agree. Yeah. I think I'm more leaning towards the rebel. There's one that's kind of in between. Do you remember the one?
So there's an upholder, rebel, questioner, and obliger.
Okay. I think, between the upholder maybe and the, I can't remember. I have to take it again, but when you said, yes, for some people, accountability doesn't work, I tend to not be able to work with an accountability partner so much, but what helps me is announcing things publicly, and that holds me accountable. So it's more like the accountability to myself.
Yeah.
And saying, I'll get this book published by spring 2021. And then I know, okay, now I better get this thing together.
Yeah. And that can work really well for rebels, actually, because rebels are very strongly motivated by their identity. So if you believe that your identity is, I do what I say I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And then you've said you're going to do a thing.
Yeah, that's exactly me. So, so public accountability is the way to go for rebels. Yeah. Yeah. There's one more thing that kind of, we talked about the vision, but there's this other thing that's kind of coming up always towards the end of the year that has a lot to do with productivity and vision. Maybe, usually towards the end of the year, we start to plan for the next year, and we make vision boards and have all these goals. And so what do we do with that? Like, do we not do it at all because we say, well, we're just going to be gentle and not kind of beat ourselves over the head in case we don't meet the goal? Or do we still set the goals, but then are more gentle in the actual, kind of application and execution of getting there?
Yeah, the second one. I think the danger of not setting any goals at all is that then you lose your motivation and you lose your focus because you're not clear on where it is that you're heading. So, I think it's really important, again, to start from that place of vision, and that works differently for different people. It could be vision boards, could be some writing, it could be visualization. Start from there. And then, set some goals and be flexible with them. Be willing to be flexible with them. And again, with those goals, checking in, is it in alignment with my vision and my values, and am I excited by it? Give yourself some idea of a time frame, but again, in a gentle, my approach is about being gentle and non-pushy, and trying not to come at it from that energy of forcing it. What's going to feel good?
Right.
And what's going to feel realistic. Doesn't mean you're letting yourself off the hook. It just means that you're setting yourself up to succeed rather than to fail. And my recommendation is keep checking in with the goals. And like, you've done a great thing by having that at the top of your planning thing that you use every day. That's awesome. Every time I speak to a client, we start from, okay, what's the vision? What are the goals? Does that still feel in alignment? And I think as we move through the year and the months move on, it's okay if the goal doesn't still feel in alignment. Sometimes we can force ourselves to stick with something because we wrote it down and we said we would.
Right.
And again, another big key to productivity, in my view, is being okay letting things go. So something that you wanted back in March this year, for example, maybe right now with everything that's gone on since then, doesn't feel in alignment anymore. And that's okay. Yeah.
It's interesting. I agree, I think.
Okay.
I think. And I want to make sure that we talk about the same kind of goals. So when I said what's at the top of my daily planner, the big goal is the gentle business revolution. So it's a project, it's an idea. Sometimes I worked with business coaches and they asked me about my financial goal.
Right.
And so that was the number one thing that we had to achieve. And that's where I don't agree anymore. I no longer want to just look at my number as my goal. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I don't find that particularly helpful. I want to be creating from a place of service, from wanting to support people. So my goals are more around what I want to create and what I want to build. And it might be around building my community. It might be around particular projects that I'm working on, knowing that all of those things will inevitably impact on the number, the income. Again, I think it comes back to this self-awareness thing of what feels motivating to you.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think there are so many different ways of doing it. And it's figuring out what works best for you, I think. For some people, that money, that number might be a real driving factor. Doesn't work for me. Sounds like it doesn't work for you. I mean, there are other ways.
Yeah, it it just feels like I've never been only motivated by money, right? What matters to me is the bigger mission, the cause. And yes, obviously that means money needs to come in and does come in by almost like a byproduct, right?
Yeah.
And I think what I'm really talking about to gentle marketers is like, yes, money is important, especially gentle marketers sometimes kind of focus almost like too much only on the cause and the mission. Money is important, but I just think that gentle marketers are not motivated if you just give them a big number and say, here, hustle your way towards that goal, because that's what it feels like to me. When I have a number, I'm going to be hustling towards that goal. If I have words, a mission, then it doesn't feel like hustling.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And, you know, as you were speaking then, I was kind of thinking, it's almost like it's not even really the number. It's not the amount of money that I'm interested in. It's what that gives me.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm aiming towards.
Yeah.
And there's ways of finding that with a smaller amount of money as well. A lot of the time, I'm going slightly off topic here.
Yeah. That brings us to the definition of success, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think we kind of need to slowly start to wrap up here, but I'd like you to mention kind of like one thing that you would recommend people start with.
Yeah. And we've talked about this already. And I know it sounds weird from somebody who's here to talk about productivity, but it really is coming back to that vision.
Mm-hmm.
And my suggestion for the small thing that you can do is to get really clear on that vision and connect with it regularly. Don't just write it down and forget about it. Connect with it regularly. And the reason that I think that is so important when it comes to productivity is because once you're really tuned in with that, you can start applying it to all of the minutiae that's going on in your days. And you can start asking yourself why you're doing all of the things that you're doing. And is it actually moving you closer to your vision, or is it moving you further away? And when you start really thinking in that slightly different way, again, it keeps you motivated because you can see why this tiny little task over here that is feeling a bit tedious, you can see why it's important and how it fits into the bigger picture. And again, a side effect of that is that also allows you to see what you can let go of, which is going to help you to create the space that we were speaking about at the beginning, because there's possibly things you're doing that have got no correlation whatsoever to where you're headed, and you're just doing it because you've always done it.
That's such a good point. Yeah.
Tuning into that and finding a compelling why for all of the little things, which is aligned with your vision, is gold when it comes to productivity, in my view. And it also prevents that shiny object syndrome and helps us to stay in our lane because we're not getting pulled around all over the place. So the small thing is to connect in with your vision and then use that to inform how you're moving through your days.
Yeah. 2 books come to mind. The first one is Starting with the Why from Simon Sinek. That I think that really kind of helps with the big vision. And then my all-time favorite business book, changed my life, is Essentialism by Greg McKeown.
Yeah.
That's really about also what we're talking about is like focus your energy on what matters to you and say no to the rest.
Yeah.
I think that is so important, especially for, people who are similar to the two of us. So a bit of a perfectionists who just want to do everything exactly right.
Yeah.
And there's just things that you need to let go of and might be even important things. Like at the time they might feel like, but I can't let this go. This is really important to me. But if it's not, working towards your big vision, then maybe it's just not the right time and you need to let go of it so you can have this energy and creativity to work towards your big goal.
Yeah. And I think there's real power in just saying not now to things.
Yeah.
That feels much more comfortable than saying no sometimes if we've got that attachment to something.
So true. True. This has been a delight. Thanks so much for talking to me about productivity and all the similar things that we've gone through. Louise, tell people where they can find you and find out more about how to work with you.
Yeah, so my website is bettylouonline.com. And there's actually a resource on there that I'd love to share, which helps with that process I was talking about earlier, from going from vision to goals to small steps to action. So it's called From Big Idea to Inspired Action, and it's a powerful planning workbook that will help you lay all of that out. So if you go to bettylouonline.com/gentle, you'll find that there. And if you want to connect with me on social media, I'm on LinkedIn as Louise Miller-Betty Lou, and I'd love to connect with you over there too.
Wonderful. Make sure you customize the invitation and tell Louise that you listened to our episode here.
Oh yes, the LinkedIn expert. Absolutely, Sarah. Yes.
It just makes it more gentle and human.
Yeah.
Last question, Louise. What are you grateful for today or this week?
I am so grateful to finding my way to this work. To be honest, I've started work with a couple of new clients this week, and it just makes my heart so happy because, the world really, right now especially, the world needs more kind of values-driven businesses making an impact. Mm-hmm. And as we were saying earlier, a lot of the people that are running those businesses don't have the grounded, logical, organized energy that I can bring. So I'm so grateful to have found my way to supporting those people so that we can get their brilliance out into the world. And yeah, I felt that really strongly this week. So thank you for the question. It's really made me feel into that. So thank you, Sarah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Louise, for the work you do and showing up here on the Gentle Business Revolution podcast. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation and got some inspiration to get stuff done the gentle way. Please check out Louise's website at bettylouonline.com or bettylouonline.com/Sarah for a powerful planning workbook for small business owners with big ambition. Thanks so much, Louise, for providing that for the gentle marketers on this show. All those links can also be found at the show notes page, sarahsandacroce.com/GBR64. On Wednesday, I'll be posting another quick update about my Kickstarter campaign, which you can also still join at sarahsandacroce.com/Kickstarter in order to be among the first to read the book and get invited to the book birthing party, and also just kind of figure out and see for yourself what this Kickstarter is all about. I, for myself, am having tons of fun on there. It's just a different platform that is really great, I think, for creatives. Then next Friday, I dedicate to all working parents with a delightful conversation with Sarah I never know how to pronounce her last name. I think it's Argonal or Argonal. The whole self-lifestyle for working parents. I hope you will join me on this journey to a kinder marketing paradigm. And let's not forget to be the change we want to see in the world. Speak soon.